turn the mic on. I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody to our Committee of Adjustment meeting. If you do have a cell phone, I'm going to ask you to turn the ringer off. I'll be sure that mine is off here right now. And if your phone does ring during the meeting, please answer it beyond earshot of the room. So now, members of the public with us this evening, if you have an interest in a particular application tonight and you'd like to be notified of any decision, please send an email with your name and address to our Secretary Treasurer, Lindsay Stamen. Her email address is lsthamann@cityofkingston.ca. And as well, we have sign-up sheets at the very back of the room, one sign-up sheet for every application this evening. So if you're with us in person and you wish to be notified of any decisions, be sure to fill out the sign-up sheet. So I'll now read the following notice. The notice of decision for the applications we review this evening will only be forwarded to those who have either presented a written request for the decision or to those who have recorded their name and address on the form provided at the back of the room. Furthermore, a formal request is necessary to be advised of a possible Ontario Land Tribunal hearing on these matters, and in order to be allowed to make a presentation to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which is otherwise known as the OLT. So I'd now like to share with you the five-part format that I will be using as we navigate through the applications this evening. In the first part, I'm going to start by introducing the application. So if you are the applicant or the agent, I'm going to ask you to come up here to my right. There's a speaker's area where there are a row of microphones. And I'm going to ask you to state your name and your address for the record, and then you will have an opportunity to express your concern or ask your questions. Or provide any additional information you feel is necessary for the application. In step number 2, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions of either the applicant or staff. Then in the third step, I'll open the public portion of the meeting where members of the public can come up to the speaker's area to the right or the speaker's area to the left. And, or if you're following along remotely, you can raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And when I recognize you, I'll ask you to state your full name and address for the record, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask your question or make your comment. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to make a comment, and I'll be sure to give a warning at the 4-minute mark, but it will be helpful if speakers do not repeat the same information over and over again. That's just not helpful for the committees at all. Now, during the public portion of the meeting, do not expect an immediate response to your questions or comments, because it's during the public portion of the meeting we physically record the questions and comments, and it's only after I close the public portion of the meeting will the questions and comments be addressed by the applicant, the agent, or staff. And I'll be calling 3 times for public comments before closing the public portion of the meeting. In the fourth step, I'll close the public portion of the meeting and I'll give the applicant or their agent or staff an opportunity to address those public comments. And then in the 5th and final step, I'll turn it over to the committee where we will make a motion and deliberate on the application and make an ultimate decision. Then we just rinse and we repeat. I'll be using the same format for all 8 applications this evening. So I'll now call on Ian, our clerk, to confirm quorum. Ian?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm we do have quorum. Currently absent from the meeting is Aniz Karaj and David Morton.
Very good, thanks very much. So I'll now call the meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. and I'll refer you to the agenda. So committee members, can I call for a motion to approve the agenda with the addendum that went out this afternoon? So moved by Jordan and seconded by Somnath. Any discussion? None? So all in favor, raise your physical hands. And that is carried, unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Now that we're looking for confirmation of the minutes of the June 19th meeting be approved. Can I have somebody move that and second that? So moved by Ken and seconded by Peter? Okay. Any discussion? I see none. So all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that is unanimously carried. All right. Do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Yes, Ken.
Mr. Chairman, item 8I of the agenda, which is 926 928 Portsmouth Avenue. Pardon me. The agent for the applicant is my neighbor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any other declarations? No, I see none. All right, thanks for that. We have no delegations. We do have one request for deferral this evening, and it's for the very first one, as outlined in the addendum. It is for the application for 652 Princess Street. So we just need a motion, somebody to move deferral.
It's already been done because of the addendum, sir.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. By approval of the addendum, it was already voted on, so that's already been deferred.
Thanks for the clarification. So that was two. All right, so then we'll move on to our first piece of new business, which is number 8B, which is for 3048 Creekford Road. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our first application tonight is an application for minor variance, file number D13038-2023. The address is 3048 Creekford Road.
And we have Amy. Welcome, Amy. She's our planner.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This is a very brief presentation regarding this minor variance application. Essentially, it's to reduce the minimum lot frontage requirement for a retained lot further to a minor variance application and consent applications that were approved earlier this year in April by the committee. Next slide, please. Essentially, as detailed in the staff report, it was determined through detailed survey information prepared to satisfy conditions of the consent to sever applications that the lot frontage available for the retained lot, once two lots with 60-meter frontages were severed, was slightly less than the 65-meter frontage approved through the minor variance application, which requires a further reduction of 0.7 meters. Next slide, please. So in summary, the minor variance requested as part of the subject application from 90-meter frontage to 64.3 meters does not alter staff's analysis or position on the initial application presented to committee this past April and is recommended for approval with conditions. Notice was provided in accordance with the Planning Act, and there have been no pieces of correspondence received by staff. And approval of the application will allow the applicant to continue to satisfy conditions of the consent and to ensure the frontages of the retained parcel is compliant with the Kingston zoning bylaw. So I'll leave this in the committee's hands and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Amy. So do we have the applicant or their agent with us this evening? Yes. So if I could just get you to tap the little button to turn the mic on, and then state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. My name is Kelsey Jones. I am a planner with Photon Planning and Design. I'm the agent for the applicant this evening. I have reviewed staff's report and I'm in agreement with the recommendation. If there are any questions, happy to assist with answering them.
Very good, thank you. Okay, committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? I see none, so we'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us in-house or online to speak to the application for 3048 Creekford Road? Please raise your physical or virtual hand. Do we have anybody with us wishing to speak to the application for 3048 Creekford Road? Raise your physical or virtual hand. My third and final call is anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 3048 Creekford Road. Please raise your physical or virtual hand. I see none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Ken and seconded by Somnath. Any discussion on this? None at all. So all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that's unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, next application is number C, which is for 95 Charles Street and 99 Charles Street. Lindsay, can I have you pull this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Up next, we have an application for consent and minor variance. The file numbers are D10-023-2023 and D13-032-2023. The address is 95 and 99 Charles Street.
Apologies for that noise. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So this is an application for a minor variance and consent for the property municipally known as 95 and 99 Charles Street. The purpose of the consent application is to rectify an unintentional merger of 95 and 99 Charles Street by restoring the previously existing lot fabric. Minor variances to permit reduced lot area, reduced lot frontage, and reduced setbacks are requested in order to facilitate this proposed severance. The subject property is located close to the intersection of Montreal Street and Charles Street within the North Kingstown area of Kingston. The property is designated residential in the official plan and zoned UR5 in the zoning bylaw. The surrounding neighborhood context is primarily residential with some commercial uses along Montreal Street, and the adjacent residential uses include a variety of buildings including single detached homes, semi-detached homes, as well as townhomes. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to provide some additional context about this application, as well as for minor variance number D13-028-2023, which will be discussed as the next item on the agenda. So 95 and 99 Charles Street have historically existed as separate properties. 95 Charles Street is developed as a single detached home, while 99 Charles Street is developed as a townhouse, which is attached to the townhouses at 101 and 105 Charles Street. The current owners of the subject property, Annette Barwise and William Higginson, purchased 95 Charles Street in 2001. Shortly after this, William Higginson purchased 99 Charles Street. And in 2015, Annette Barwise's name was added to the title of 99 Charles Street, making ownership of these adjacent properties identical. When ownership became identical, the adjacent properties were merged into a single property, but this was unknown to the owners at the time. So fast forwarding to May 2023, the owners attempted to sell 99 Charles Street to Scott Gordon, who is the applicant for the minor variance, which will be discussed next on the agenda. During this attempted sale of 99 Charles Street, it was discovered that the properties had merged and were in fact no longer separately conveyable. And after learning this, the owners applied for consent and minor variance in order to restore the lot fabric that existed prior to the unintentional merger. No physical development or exterior changes are proposed to the subject property, and the sole purpose of this application is to separate the merged lots and complete the intended sale of 99 Charles Street. Separately, Scott Gordon, who is the intended purchaser of 99 Charles Street, has submitted an application for minor variance to permit the construction of a second story above the existing rear addition at 99 Charles Street. Since Mr. Gordon's application for minor variance would facilitate development, and this current application only contemplates legal changes to the lot fabric, planning staff felt that it would be appropriate to treat these as two separate applications, despite the fact that they concern the same property. Mr. Gordon's application is the next item on the agenda and will be discussed in more detail at that time. So pictured above is a site plan submitted by the applicant, which shows the proposed lot lines after the proposed consent. The site plan is based on a land survey of 95 and 99 Charles Street from 2013, when the properties were still separate. The intention is to create a new lot line in the exact same location as the interior lot line between 95 and 99 Charles Street, as shown in the 2013 survey. So the retained lot, which contains 95 Charles Street, would have a lot area of 370.3 meters squared and a frontage of 12.3 meters onto Charles Street. The severed lot, which contains the townhouse at 99 Charles Street, would have a lot area of 232.2 square meters and a frontage of 5.8 meters. So in order to restore the previously existing lot fabric, minor variances are required to accommodate lot dimensions and setbacks that do not meet the zoning requirements. For the retained lot that contains 95 Charles, a minor variance is requested to permit an existing accessory structure to be set back 1.15 meters from the proposed interior lot line. The zoning requires a 1.2 meter setback, and therefore a variance of 0.05 meters is required. The retained lot also requires a variance to permit a reduced amount of aggregate interior setbacks. 3.6 meters of aggregate interior setbacks is required, and 2.76 meters are proposed. Therefore, a variance of 0.84 meters is required. As for the severed lot, which contains the townhouse at 99 Charles, a minor variance to permit a lot area of 232.2 square meters is required. 370 square meters is required by the zoning, and therefore the applicants have requested a variance of 137.8 square meters. A minor variance to permit lot frontage of 5.8 meters is also required. The zoning requires 10 meters of frontage, and therefore a variance of 4.2 meters is requested. For the last variance, the zoning requires a 3-meter setback from the interior lot line for a townhouse where there is no common party wall on the lot line. A setback of 0 meters is proposed, and therefore a variance of 3 meters is required. Site photos of both 95 and 99 Charles Street are provided above. Figure 1 shows a frontal view of 95 Charles Street with parking in the driveway adjacent to the house, while Figure 2 shows a frontal view of 99 Charles Street. As you can see in the photo, the property is currently uninhabited due to a fire damage sustained in May of 2022. Parking for 99 Charles Street is provided at the rear of the property and is accessed via an existing easement over 109, 105, and 101 Charles Street. In accordance with the Planning Act, notice of this application was mailed to 42 property owners within the required distance, and signage was posted on the property. At the time of finishing this presentation, only one public comment was received, which had expressed support for the application. As the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and meets the general intent and purpose of both the official plan and the Kingston zoning bylaw, Planning Services is recommending this application for consent and minor variance for approval. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that. So do we have the applicant or their agent with us this evening? Okay. Are they in the gallery? Okay. All right.
Yes, I am here.
Very good. Can I have you state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Al Lee. My address is 9 Oak Ridge Avenue, Kingston, Ontario, K7L4S8.
Great, thank you. Thanks for being here. Is there anything further you wish to add to the application this evening?
No, Mr. Slevin did a great job in terms of summarizing everything, and really it's just an inadvertent merger that we're trying to correct.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for that. Okay, so committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant, their agent, or staff? I see. Oh, Peter?
Just a question for clarity. I noticed it was quite obvious that 105 was a residential building. What was one between 105 and 99? I imagine it's 101, but was that also a residential building, or was that something else? It looks like it had been burned out as well. Or at least it was boarded up.
Yeah, it's part of the original building. It is another place that needs to be dealt with, but from a different owner.
Okay. It was part of the original fabric. It needs to be dealt with, but in a different order. Yep. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak to the application for 95 and 99 Charles Street, Kingston? Please raise your physical or virtual hand. Do we have anybody with us in the gallery or in the public here with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 99 and 95 Charles Street? Please raise your hand. And my third and final call, does anybody want to speak to the application for 99 or 95 Charles Street? Please raise your hand. And I see none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Peter, seconded by Jordan. Any discussion? None? So all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that is unanimously carried. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next application is number D, and it is for 99 Charles Street. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Up next is an application for minor variance, file number D13028, 2023. The address is 99 Charles Street.
Great.
Chair? Oh, sorry. Is this working? Excellent. Thank you again, and through the chair. This is an application for a minor variance at the property known as 99 Charles Street, and the purpose of this application is to permit the construction of a second-story addition above the existing stick frame rear addition on the property. As you all know from the previous agenda item, 99 Charles Street is developed as a townhouse. It is designated residential in the official plan and zoned UR5 in the zoning bylaw. The zoning requires that a townhouse in the UR5 zone be set back 3 meters from the lot line where there is no common party wall along the lot line. A setback of 0 meters is proposed, and therefore a variance of 3 meters is required. The existing rear addition is currently set back approximately 0 meters from the lot line dividing 95 and 99 Charles Street, and the proposed second story would not be set any closer to the lot line than the existing rear addition. However, a variance is required to permit a 0 meter setback for the second story addition. Provided above are the drawings submitted by the applicant showing views of the proposed addition from the front and right sides. The height of the rear addition would be approximately 7.9 meters from finished grade level, and this complies with the maximum height provisions of the UR5 zone. Floor plans for the main floor are shown in Figure 1, which intend to be remodeled following fire damage, and floor plans for the second floor are shown in Figure 2. As shown on these floor plans, the new second-story addition would contain a bedroom, washroom, as well as additional storage space. There is a city-owned English oak tree located in the front yard of 99 Charles Street, as shown on the current slide. The applicant has no plans to remove this tree, and construction work will happen towards the rear of the property where this tree is developed in the front lawn. However, the applicant is required to obtain a tree permit as a condition of approval for this minor variance, and this will ensure that the city-owned tree is protected during the construction of the proposed second story and that no staging or equipment will be left in or on the tree. In accordance with the Planning Act, this application was mailed to 42 property owners and signage was posted on the property. At the time of finishing this presentation, no public comments were received regarding this application. So, as the application is consistent with provincial policy, meets the general intent and purpose of both the official plan and the Kingston zoning bylaw, Planning Services is also recommending this application for approval. Thank you again, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
Great, thanks, Jacob. So do we have the applicant or their agent with us this evening? Yes, if so, if you'd like to just come up to one of the speaker areas and turn the mic on, just give us your name and address for the record, please. Yep, anyone? You see the little button, it'll go red. I think just on the front, if you tap it on the base of it.
Thank you. My name is Scott Gordon. I am the applicant for this minor variance on 99 Charles Street.
Good, and welcome. Do you have anything further you want to add to the application?
I do not.
Okay, very good. So committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? And I see none, so I'll open up the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us wishing to speak to the application for 99 Charles Street? Please raise your physical hand or your virtual hand in Zoom. Is anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 99 Charles Street? Please raise your physical or virtual hand. And my third and final call, would anybody like to speak to the application for 99 Charles Street? Please raise your physical or virtual hand. And I see none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Ken and seconded by Somnath. Any discussion? I see none, so all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, our next one is number 8E, which is an application for minor variance, 1200 Princess Street. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance, file number D13033-2023, and the address is 1200 Princess Street.
All right, and welcome, Lindsay.
Good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair, my name is Lindsay Reed, and I'm the city planner on this file. The purpose and effect of the proposed variance is to reduce the minimum width of the drive aisles where the parking spaces are perpendicular to the drive aisle from 6.7 meters to 5.7 meters for one-way drive aisles and 6 meters for two-way drive aisles within the proposed parking garage. The parking garage will accommodate vehicle parking for the proposed long-term care facility, as well as institutional and commercial uses on site. Next slide. Shown here is the location of 1200 Princess Street, also known as Providence Village. To the north of the site is Princess Street with a range of commercial uses. To the east and south are a number of apartment complexes, and to the west is a low-rise residential neighborhood. The property is designated institutional in the official plan and is owned institutional minor with exception overlay 82, urban 4, and urban multi-residential 6 in the Kingston zoning bylaw 2022-62. Next slide. The property was recently rezoned to facilitate the development of a 6-story, 320-bed long-term care facility and an above-grade parking structure. It is now part of an active site plan control application. Of note, the previous development application to establish the permissions for the long-term care facility and parking garage was approved during the transition from bylaw 8499 to 2022-62. This requirement for the variance is a result of this transition. Of note, under the former zoning bylaw, the design standards for off-street vehicle parking facilities were largely performance-based, taking into consideration vehicle access and maneuvering, surface treatment, and the marking of spaces. The bylaw did not prescribe aisle widths, but rather the applicant needed to demonstrate it met the performance standards for a functional parking area. Next slide. Approval of this variance reduced the minimum drive aisle widths where a parking space is perpendicular to the drive aisle from 6.7 meters to 5.7 meters for one drive aisle and 6 meters for a two-way drive aisle. As such, the variance requested is a reduction of 1 meter for a one-way drive aisle and 0.7 meters for a two-way drive aisle. Next slide. Shown on this drawing is the ground floor plan of the parking garage. Of note are a couple changes that have been included in the most recent site plan control submission for technical review, one of which is the removal of the basement level of the parking area, which is kind of circled on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, the water/utilities room. And I note this because it is included in one of our recommended conditions that the applicant provide access to this room from the exterior. Next slide. Shown here are the vehicle movement diagrams included in the transportation brief the applicant provided. This review and analysis determined that the proposed vehicle circulation with a two-way center drive aisle and a one-way side drive aisles avoids the overlapping paths of turning vehicles traveling in opposite directions and allows for passenger vehicles to circulate without conflict. As such, the reduction will allow for adequate vehicle circulation and will satisfy the needs of the development. Next slide. Public consultation included mailing of the notice within the local area, 3 signs posted on site, and a courtesy notice in the WIG. As such, it was provided in accordance with the Planning Act, and as to date, staff have received no correspondence on this application. Next slide. In summary, the requested variance was found to maintain the intent and purpose of the Kingston official plan and the zoning bylaw 2022-62, was found to be desirable for the appropriate use development of the land, building, and structure, and be minor in nature. The proposed application meets all 4 tests of subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval, subject to the proposed conditions. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So do we have any, the applicant or their agent with us this evening? Yes. Can you just state your name and address for the record?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my name is Kelsey Jones. I'm a planner with Photon Planning and Design. I am the agent for the applicant. I've reviewed staff's report, don't have anything further to add at this time, but if there are any questions, happy to assist with answering them.
Great, thank you. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant, the agent, or staff? Yeah, Peter?
I'm looking at this, again, it's cars that on the, I'm more concerned with the one-way drive aisles that for a vehicle now to go into the parking, the bylaw, from what I understand, requires a 6.7 meters, and we're proposing 5.7. So now again, that's when you're driving in and then having to park perpendicularly. Has any consideration been given to angled parking, which would make it easier and not require such a sharp turn to come out that you'd back out? Has any consideration been given to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Truthfully, I'm not sure if the architect has considered that, but we are going through the detailed design currently for the site plan application. You know, an engineer has reviewed the current proposal with the parking spaces perpendicular to the drive aisles, and you know, it's in their opinion that it is sufficient and that the parking garage will function. You know, in future, if there are issues functionally once the parking garage is in operation, may make changes, but for the time being, the engineer has demonstrated that the current perpendicular spaces and the one-way drive aisles are sufficient and will ensure that there's adequate space for turning movements.
Again, my concern, not so much with the two-way aisle, but with the single lane aisle. Again, we also it's not an existing building, it's one that's being built. And I'm just wondering why we can't take a look at the redesign of the building before it's constructed. There hasn't been a shovel in the ground yet that I could see. And is it, you know, possibly a larger building area would accommodate the requirements for the bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I certainly appreciate the recommendation, and I will take that back to the architect since you pointed out that it hasn't been constructed yet, so the time to make changes would be now. So I will bring that back to the architect and have that review and consider that before we make any, you know, final site plan submissions.
I guess I'm concerned with, you know, again, we're serving a long-term care facility. A lot of the visitors would probably be my age and, you know, don't have the range of flexibility that a younger person would have. But again, I'm visualizing a possible, like, fender scrapes, car scrapes, things like that, people trying to get in and out of these spaces. It'd be quite difficult. I think we have an opportunity here to take a look at the building before it's built and see if we can't. I can't understand why, when you're building a brand new building, we can't meet the bylaw. Something existing, yeah, okay, it may not be able to meet the bylaw. That's why we have a committee of adjustment. But when we have a brand new build, I don't see why we can't say it has to meet the bylaw. And I don't know, possibly, you know, one thing would be to defer this to allow the applicant or the designer to take a look at some of these concerns and come back with a revised application that meets the bylaw.
Sure, that's certainly valid. I see Megan has her hand up, so Megan?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your questions, Peter. Those are excellent questions, and there's certainly sort of a series of events that have brought us to this application today. And I know Lindsay reviewed those in her presentation, but there was some connectivity issues there, I think. So I'm happy to reiterate some of that. So this application originally came actually to council as a more fulsome zoning bylaw amendment, which was approved by council at a time when we were transitioning into our new zoning bylaw. So the property at that time was subject to the former zoning bylaw 8499. And at that time, it was subject to the parking provisions of 8499, which are a little bit more general than what we have now in the new zoning bylaw, such that they're described that sufficient space must be provided to allow for turning movement in and out of parking spaces, but minimum aisle dimensions were not specified in zoning bylaw 8499. So when this site-specific zoning was brought under our current zoning bylaw, when it was approved, this was essentially an oversight at that time that site-specific provisions to allow for the aisle widths that were proposed at the time of the zoning bylaw amendment were not incorporated into the site-specific zoning. And so as a result of that, what happened is, because our new zoning bylaw does have very specific standards for aisle widths, this became a zoning deficiency in reviewing the proposal moving forward to a site plan and a building permit stage, in particular for this specific item, because it's not specifically mentioned in the site-specific zoning for the property. As a result, it would be subject to the general provisions of the new zoning bylaw, and zoning deficiency was created. So really, in bringing this application forward in its current condition, as opposed to requiring a redesign, the intent was to facilitate the development moving forward in the form that it was approved by council, as opposed to requiring redesign work on the part of the applicant as a result of the city's new zoning bylaw, which really wasn't the intent.
Yeah, so you're saying then, if I correct here, and I understand you correctly, that this proposal would meet the previous bylaw. However, we have a more restrictive one now, or a more specific one.
That's exactly right, yes. The proposal complied with the former zoning bylaw, but since it was approved under the former and now we have a new, that's what has resulted in the need for this additional variance. So staff are working closely with our Transportation Services Department in terms of reviewing the minor variance application that's before us and the turning movement diagrams that have been submitted by the applicant. Staff are comfortable that the variance that's requested will be functional in this case. The one-way movements are specifically proposed to ensure that the reduced aisle width will not be a problem in those locations where it will be a little bit narrower. I hope that answers your question.
I guess I could see it. I could see it if with angled parking as opposed to perpendicular parking, and that it wouldn't be so difficult to get in or out. Just going in on an angle as opposed to a 90-degree. And I can just visualize a lot of little bumps and grinds and happening in that garage. The number of parking spaces. Do you foresee those being fully utilized? Would that be another option to maybe take a look at? That could you, by reducing some of the parking spaces, maybe, and angling them, we could get something that would be, more functional. And right now, as I said, if had the construction started, I could say, okay, I feel a little differently on it. But when you're starting with just a vacant field, lots of property back there, and so I don't know. I can just see problems in the future with this, and once it's constructed, you're stuck with them. Where now you can probably do something about it, and that would be my concern. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, good, point taken. Ken?
Yeah, this is a comment. I'm not looking for an answer. I observed that the PTAC analysis, the turning movement analysis, is based on a 5.6 meter vehicle, which is highly standard, I'm pretty sure, in traffic engineering design and parking lot design. We do see vehicles smaller than that, and we see a lot of vehicles bigger than that. I think it boils down to an inconvenience for some users with bigger vehicles. We'll simply have to do a 3-point turn to get in and out. Other than that, I accept the engineering recommendation that's before us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other comments or questions from the committee members? Okay, so now I'll open up the public portion of the meeting. Do we have anybody with us here this evening willing or wishing to speak to the application for 1200 Princess Street? Please raise your physical hand or your virtual hand in Zoom. So we are on application for 1200 Princess Street. Anybody, would you like to speak to that application? Please raise your physical or virtual hand. And third and final call. Is anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 1200 Princess Street? Please let yourself be known. And I see nobody, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Ken and seconded by Jordan. And any discussion? None? So all in favor, raise your physical hands. So that'd be 4, okay, so 4 and against, 1 against. Okay, 1 opposed. Okay, and the motion carries. The next application we have is number F for 53 William Street. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Up next is an application for minor variance, file number D13035-2023, and the address is 53 William Street.
Great, thank you, and welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, and through the chair. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Wonderful, thank you. This proposal seeks relief from the requirements of the zoning bylaw for interior setback, front setback, rear setback, and rear setback for a deck in order to add a 1-story rear addition, a deck in the side yard, and expand the existing front vestibule. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on the north side of William Street, east of Wellington Street, and west of King Street East. Next slide, please. The proposal requests a 0.7 meter reduction to the required minimum interior setback, a 19 meter increase to the required minimum front setback, I'll get into that a little bit later, and a 6.3 meter reduction to the required rear setback, and a 0.8 meter reduction to the required rear setback for a deck with a height no greater than 0.6 meters. Next slide, please. Shown here is the site plan provided by the applicant, which includes the layout of the property, including the existing semi-detached house, as well as the proposed expanded front vestibule, rear setback, and deck located in the side yard. Next slide, please. All right. Zoning bylaw number 2262 has requirements for minimum front setback and building depth, which would limit the development on the property for the existing dwelling to be located in the area between the 2 red lines, so shown here. As this is a designated heritage property, it would not be possible to add a front addition to the property. Accordingly, the variances requested would increase the minimum front setback and decrease the rear setback to acknowledge the location of the existing semi-detached house and allow for the expansion of the existing front vestibule and the construction of the rear addition in the area approximately shown between the 2 blue lines. So as you can see, like the building depth wouldn't be greater than what's allowed, but it would just be in a different location because of where the building is sited currently. The Kingston zoning bylaw defines building depth as the horizontal distance between the required front setback and the principal building's rear wall, measured perpendicular to the front setback. An increase in the minimum front setback for the subject property would enable the development to proceed without any variance to building depth, as the building depth would be under 18 meters as measured from the proposed front setback. Next slide, please. Shown here are floor plans for the ground floor, which detail the proposed expanded front vestibule, the proposed rear addition, and deck located in the side yard. So the before is, or the current how it is on the top, and on the bottom is the proposed expansion. Next slide, please. The applicant has provided elevations which show the house before and after the proposed development. The elevation on the right shows the expanded front vestibule, rear addition, and deck in the side yard from the front of the house. Next slide, please. The elevation on the bottom shows the expanded vestibule, rear addition, and deck from the east side of the house. So That's the house away from the common party wall. Next slide, please. And the elevation here on the bottom shows the expansions and the deck from the west side of the house, although you can't see the deck because it's hidden by the addition there. So this is the side attached to 55 William Street, the other side of the semi-detached house. Next slide, please. And here we have an elevation. The one on the right shows the rear addition and the deck in the side yard from the north side of the house. Next slide, please. One sign has been posted on the property, an ad has been placed in the Kingston Whig Standard, and 58 notices were mailed out. No comments have been received regarding this application. Next slide, please. Approval of this application will permit the construction of a one-story rear addition, a deck located in the side yard, and the expansion of the existing front vestibule. Staff are supportive of the proposal as it would provide a more functional entrance to the existing residence, additional interior living space, and functional outdoor amenity area for the existing residents, while recognizing the heritage context of the property and the location of the existing semi-detached house on the property. I leave this in your hands and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks for that, Sarah. Okay, do we have the applicant or their agent with us this evening? They're online. Okay, so I'll have you identify yourself by name and address for the record. I think we're just bringing you in now. Unmute your mic. Oh, there we go.
Hi there, my name is Todd Biggerman. I am here representing Mark Peabody, Custom Builder, and the clients.
Okay, welcome. Is there anything further you wish to add to the application we have before us this evening?
I think Sarah did a splendid job.
She did. Okay, thank you.
I also would just like to point out that this is a pretty unique site, and how the building is sited on the property. As Sarah mentioned, I would just like to reiterate that it's pretty tight to get any form of addition on this cottage. So yeah. This is as tight and as small as we could make it. And we have been talking to Heritage. It just so happens that the Heritage hearing is 2 days from today. So we went concurrent with our applications. And in speaking with the Heritage planner, they have pretty much approved it without approving it yet. So staff has said it looks like it will pass. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that. All right, committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? Peter?
Not a question, just for clarification. In the photographs, it looks like the where the deck is going to be is presently looks like a patio, patio stones. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So it won't be beyond that. It'll pretty well be what's there now. Just only it'll be raised off of the ground.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions? None? Okay, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have anybody with us this evening willing to speak to the application for 53 William Street? Please raise your physical hand or your virtual hand. Yes, so if you'd like to come up to the microphone, press the little button and just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name's, excuse me, my name is Catherine Hyatt and I live at 55 William Street.
Yes.
It's really a question that I have about the future, if you like, of this building. If this is approved as a one-story addition, would that have any impact in the future on a second story being constructed on top of it?
I'm going to defer to the planner for that.
Oh, sorry. We're just gathering in for the questions right now. So just so I'm clear, Ms. Hyatt, so the question is, with the future of the building, does this set a precedent for building on top? Okay. Any other questions?
Not right now. It depends on the answer.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, so do we have any other members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 53 William Street? Please raise your physical or your virtual hand. I'll call for a third and final, oh yes, sir. So if you'd like to come up and grab a mic. And just state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Don Taylor, 139 William Street. To give some context, my family and I lived in this house and the adjacent house, 55 William, for 26 years. It's a rather unusual property with the houses set right at the very back of the property. And we bought the property from an elderly lady who was born in the house. So it's been a residence for many, many years, and that's as so often happens. And as so often happens, you probably realize family size residences are being expanded to become boarding houses or Airbnbs. And so I always feel some regret. I still live downtown and see it's an unfortunate trend that I hope has some pushback at times. This property is also designated, and the application for heritage approval will come up in a few days, I believe. I think the applicants have done an excellent job of trying to satisfy the requirements for planning and for heritage, but I think there are still serious concerns. On the planning side, they're asking for a number of setback reductions in the rear yard, which means there will be almost no private space left in the backyard. And so it makes it even less suitable for a future family. And again, it expands the usage so that the neighbor, who is Catherine here, is going to be subject to more noise. And I should also mention that the party wall between the properties is simply an interior wall, so noise goes right through very easily. So I think as I say, it's always a bit of a regret to see the properties being filled up by additions and making the whole neighborhood a little less comfortable for families. Thank you.
Very good, thank you for that. And do we have anybody else in the gallery, public gallery, willing to speak to the application for 53 William Street? I don't see any, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and then, yes, Ken?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't understand the speaker's address. He quoted, the gentleman quoted an address, but I couldn't quite hear it.
Sorry,
Can
Ken.
you repeat it for me, please?
It was 139 William Street.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'll turn this back to the committee or the applicant to address these concerns. Who'd like to go? Sarah?
Hi, yes, and thank you, and through the chair. In regard to the first question about whether this proposal would make way for a second story in the future, the limitation in the recommended conditions in Exhibit A of the report are very clear. It would only give permission for a one-story addition, and the exact plans that would be provided are tied to that that limitation. So we would only be approving a one-story addition. Any further development on the lot would need to come back to Committee of Adjustment for further review and approval. So that, I hope, addresses that question. And in regard to additional questions related to private space, there would be still private amenity area in the side yard of the property, on the deck, as well as in the I know it's not as a private, but in front of the house, there is a decent amount of landscaping as shown in the site photos. So there would be some space in the front as well for a resident or somebody living in the dwelling to enjoy. So the side yard as well as the front yard. And in terms of noise, we do have the noise bylaw that regulates noise in the city of Kingston. In addition, I should mention that the rear addition has no windows facing the neighboring property located at 55 William Street. So I would anticipate that there wouldn't be any noise. In fact, there may be less noise as a result of the proposed addition, as there would be a building shielding the amenity area and the resident located at 55 William Street. I think I may have addressed everything, but please let me know if there are any further questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much for that. I think we did get those covered. Okay, so I guess I'll turn it back to the committee.
Just a question.
Yes.
The gentleman referenced the possibility of the property being used as an Airbnb. Would that be a permitted use for that property, or is there something, do you have a bylaw within the municipality that would govern that? I think it'd be nice to address it for this gentleman.
Okay, Megan?
Certainly, through the chair, yes, the City of Kingston has a short-term rental licensing bylaw, so any properties who want to offer short-term rentals, such as an Airbnb, require licensing from the City of Kingston's licensing department.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, so committee members, do you have any further questions of applicant or staff? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion at this point. So moved by Peter and seconded by Ken, okay. Any discussion? None, so all in favor of the application, raise your physical hand. So that's 3 in favor, opposed, and 2 opposed. I'm sorry, just Somnath and Jordan, were you voting in favor or opposed? Opposed, okay, yeah, so 3 in favor.
I'm in favor, Peter.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, so 4 in favor and 1 opposed. So the motion carries. All right, thank you. All right, the next application we have is number G, which is for 322 Brock Street. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Up next is an application for minor variance, file number D13-030-2023. The address is 322 Brock Street.
All right. Good evening. Through Mr. Chair, my name is Ricardo Peggi. I'll be presenting this application on behalf of Anne-Marie Eusebio. This minor variance is for the subject property known as 322 Brock Street. The purpose and effect is to enclose the existing underground parking garage ramp, which will be attached to the existing apartment building. So the requested variance is to reduce the interior setback from 0.6 meters to 0.46 meters. The property is located within the urban multi-residential zone type 3 and is designated residential in the official plan. The site is currently developed with a 12-story, 112-unit apartment building and contains an underground parking garage. It's located within the downtown area of the city, and it's surrounded by ground-oriented residential uses to the east, south, and west, and also by some established commercial uses, such as the grocery store to the north. The site photo indicates the location of the existing underground parking ramp in relation to the existing apartment building. And this site photo indicates the underground parking ramp in relation to the adjacent residential development along Brock Street. So here's the site plan that indicates the location of the proposed parking garage ramp enclosure, indicated in the dark gray there. The gross floor area of the enclosure will be 86 square meters. The existing ramp wall will be used as the base of the enclosure, which has an interior setback of 0.46 meters. The slide shows the perspectives of the existing conditions on site, as well as further details on the garage enclosure. The proposed garage enclosure will be an accessory use to the existing apartment building and will be compatible with the built form along Brock Street in terms of scale, style, and massing. The enclosure will not exceed a height of 3.5 meters. No windows associated with the structure, so there are no privacy concerns or issues with intrusive overlook. The variance will allow for the enclosure of the existing garage ramp, which will remove the need for the ramp's existing heating system and reduce the level of maintenance needed on the ramp. The proposal will provide functional and safe access for existing residents. As you can see, or perhaps not in this photo, but the garage door is set back over 6 meters from Brock Street, so cars turning left into the garage will be able to wait there safely as the garage door opens. Here you can see a survey of the site, which shows the driveway in relation to the adjacent properties to the east. Public notice was given in accordance with the Planning Act. One piece of correspondence has been received and has been included in tonight's addendum. 3 concerns were highlighted. The first was a concern on the impact of the structure on built heritage. Heritage Services has confirmed that the adjacent dwelling is not listed or is not a designated heritage property. So those concerns are not met with a heritage designation. There's also a parking space at the side of the neighboring dwelling at 306 Brock Street. It's noted that the existing walls will be the base of the new garage structure, so it won't actually change the area of the adjacent driveway. And the third concern was around construction materials, and it is our understanding that the development is to be constructed out of standard masonry materials. So the requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, and the requested variance is minor in nature. Therefore, planning staff recommend approval as the proposal meets all 4 tests of minor variance. Thanks.
Great, thanks very much for that. So do we have the applicant here or their agent? Welcome.
Good evening.
Hello, I'll have you just state your name and address for the record, please.
Certainly, it's Tess Gilchrist with Arcadis, and I'm here on behalf of the property owner Homestead for the application at 322 Brock Street.
Great, so welcome. Is there anything further you want to add to the application?
I think the presentation was sufficient, but if there are any follow-up questions specifically on the piece of correspondence from the neighbor, I'm happy to answer some questions as well.
Okay, thanks very much. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant, their agent, or staff? Ken?
It's a question for staff. Is this application subject to site plan control?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do not believe it will be subject to site plan control, as it's considered a minor addition onto an existing site that is subject to site plan control. I would have to, I did research that question actually beforehand. I expected it.
I do have a second question, Mr. Chairman. When I look at the site photos, which are very helpful, I found, I noticed that the controller for the garage door is mounted on the masonry wall at the top of the ramp. And that means that when cars stop to operate the controller, they're not interfering with the sidewalk, which is about 6 meters away. But when you insert a garage door at that end of that masonry wall, that means the controller has to go somewhere closer to the street, to the sidewalk. My concern being is that wherever that controller goes could influence whether cars then interfere with pedestrian movements on the sidewalk. Because they have to terminate, they have to stop prior to the door lifting. And of course, they may hang back. The staff report, and you mentioned, Ricardo, a 6 meter separation between the garage door and the sidewalk. And I agree, there's a small error in Anne Marie's email. She makes reference to property line. It's actually sidewalk. My only thought being is that some thought needs to be given to where the controller goes in order to ensure that cars stopping to operate the garage door don't interfere with free movement on the sidewalk. Thank you.
Comment?
Through the chair, I think that's a great comment and certainly something staff can work with the applicant to ensure happens. While we haven't indicated to the applicant that a formal application for site plan control will be required, it will be a minor modification to the existing file, like you just threw a memo to the file. So that's certainly something we can work with the applicant to ensure. I'll defer to Ms. Gilchrist if she has anything further to add to that point.
There has been consideration for this to ensure that there is safe access to the door. I don't have the final designs to know exactly where it's going to be, but I would also offer that this will be going through building permit review, and Building Code Services has been reviewing the application as well with respect to drainage matters, enclosing the trench drain at the bottom. So that is another item that we could address through the building permit application to ensure that there is an adequate distance and that it's functioning properly.
Okay, good. I did have a question. It was just about the stormwater runoff at the bottom of the ramp. It indicated that one of the conditions, I believe, is that it goes into the sanitary sewer. Was that a misprint? Should it have been storm sewer? Just for clarification. Megan?
The requirement is in terms of, I'm not sure if the sewer is combined in this location potentially. I'm just going to pull up the specific condition, Mr. Chair, so I can make sure I'm looking at the same thing as you.
Yes, I think it was number 7. Okay. Ricardo?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. While Megan double checks on whether it's a combined sanitary storm area, I will note that the kind of second part to that sentence does say, or by other means to meet building code requirements.
Oh, okay.
So it's staff's opinion that that provides enough flexibility.
Sure.
That the wording of that condition can be massaged.
Okay, I missed that. I could walk that back for sure. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Peggy is absolutely correct. I know that this is a condition that was specifically added at the request of building services, obviously so that we can ensure that however that drain is being connected to the municipal sewer system is being done, or sanitary is being done in such a way that it meets the building code requirements. Okay. So that's really the intent of the condition for sure.
Perfect, thanks. I have no other questions. Any other members with questions? Okay, so I'll now open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 322 Brock Street? Please raise your physical hand or your virtual hand in Zoom. Is anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 322 Brock Street? Please raise your hand. And my third and final call, do we have people with us wishing to speak to the application for 322 Brock Street? Raise your physical hand. I see none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Peter and seconded by Somnath. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you. Next one is number H, which is an application for minor variance, 627 Princess Street and 518 Albert. Lindsay, can you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance and consent, file numbers D13-034-2023, D10-024-2023, and D10-026-2023. The address is 627 Princess Street and 518 Albert Street.
Great, thank you. And I think we've got Ian. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you. Through the chair, can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, fine.
Great. Great. So my name is Ian Clendenning, and I'm pleased to present to the committee this application, which relates to 2 properties collectively subject to 3 applications, in order to allow for a 6-story mixed-use building containing 30 residential units with a mutual easement affording shared access to the rear of the 2 properties. A minor variance is proposed to allow for an increase in density, provisions related to rooftop equipment, and relief from certain parking and driveway requirements. The 2 consent applications would create the mutual easement. We could go to the next slide, please. Great. The subject lands are located on Princess Street between Nelson and Albert Streets in the Williamsville neighborhood, a very walkable part of the city with numerous amenities located within the immediate area and within walking distance to several express and regular transit routes. Next slide, please. The 518 Albert Street property is designated residential, and no development is currently proposed other than the proposed easement and driveway. The 627 Princess Street property is designated Main Street Commercial in an area which forms part of the city's center and corridors, where the majority of the city's intensification is planned to occur. Helping guide this planned function to accommodate growth, the city has adopted a specific policy area to guide development in the Williamsville area, which has recently been updated to better guide development in this area of rapid transition. The proposed development achieves key objectives of this plan, including front wall and building setbacks, which break up the massing of the building, at-grade commercial and greater floor-to-ceiling heights to enhance the public realm, and a 6-story building height affording greater densities which make more efficient use of land and support active transportation and public transit. While rooftop equipment does project above the 6-story, the Williamsville policies recognize that such features may project above the 6th story. Next slide, please. Implementing the official plan's vision for growth, the properties are zoned Williamsville Main Street 1 for 627 Princess and Urban Residential 5 for 518 Albert. A holding overlay applies to 627 Princess, requiring confirmation of servicing capacity and would be subject to a separate application. The 627 Princess property currently accommodates a large parking area and small building used as an automobile sales establishment. To either side of the lot stands 2-story commercial buildings. The 518 property is flanked to the south by a row of 5 2-story townhouses, while to the north is predominantly detached residential dwellings. Within the immediate area are a variety of recent developments, including 652, 630, 575 Princess Street, and 485 Albert Street. further west and immediately opposite, and further east, respectively. Next slide, please. Just give that a second to load. I'm not sure if you guys are seeing the actual photos.
No, we just see titles. Ian is just checking into it.
Great. And say that the photos supplied were contained as the appendix, so I won't let this hold us up too long.
Okay. Yeah, there's nothing on the slide, Ian.
Okay. However that happened, these slides I will highlight, the photos rather, are all contained as an appendix as outlined in the site photos exhibit. But I will highlight that photos of the surrounding area include 325 unit 10-story mixed-use building at 652 Princess, which is on the block immediately opposite. Immediately east of the site is a 344 unit 10-story mixed-use building and another 176 unit 6-story mixed-use building currently under construction. And of course 630 Princess Street, a 5-story 36 unit building. The proposed development fits within the neighborhood development and would not adversely impact the surrounding area. But we'll move on to the next slide, and I do apologize for that. In respect to the 518 Albert Street property, variances are proposed which relate to the shared driveway, which would replace an existing driveway at the south end of the property, with permission sought to allow an additional 1.38 meter driveway width. Next slide, please. Okay, that's curious because the photos are not loading. The variances for this driveway would afford two-way vehicular access to the rear of the properties. While there are no specific plans for the redevelopment of 518, there remains sufficient room for a building envelope, despite the increased driveway width, due in part to the greater lot width from a bulb out to the set lot of the, at the south. It is noted that the 6-meter maximum driveway width is established to prevent driveways becoming a dominant feature of the lot. In this situation, a row of trees and even a fence at the rear of the driveway give the look and feel of the easement at the north end of the property as being associated with 518 Albert Street. Next slide, please. In respect to 627 Princess, variances would allow for additional density, the projection of mechanical equipment, and deviations from the parking requirements. Next slide, please. The development at 627 Princess proposes a built form generally compliant with the zoning bylaw, with the exception to the built form being the elevator overrun area, as illustrated at the upper left area of the image. Despite the increase in density, the 6-story built form, the setbacks, and front wall conditions all conform with the policies of the official plan and zoning bylaw, while the access to Albert Street helps reduce the need for vehicles accessing directly onto Princess Street and the associated impact on the pedestrian environment. While the number of units on the lot exceed the permitted density, the density limits of the zoning bylaw were implemented in an effort to ensure a fair distribution of capacity among projects and prevent individual projects from absorbing an excessive amount of available servicing. Utilities Kingston has confirmed available capacity, and the additional 12 units sought through the increase in density would not adversely affect capacity available for future developments. Next slide, please. The elevations shown here illustrate recessed first floor at the front, providing a more inviting pedestrian area at the front of the building, as well as shelter for the site's 6 short-term bike parking, as well as setbacks at the 5th and 6th stories, which create outdoor amenity space and a more animated building face. Next slide, please. Here, the east and west elevations provide a further context of the building's stepbacks, which animate the building, as well as highlight the distance of the rooftop mechanical equipment from the edge of the building. Next slide, please. Consistent with the Williamsville Special Policy Area and provisions of the zoning bylaw, the first story is set back 3 meters from the property line, providing generous pedestrian space, while the second story overhang provides shelter to the pedestrian environment and the 6 short-term bicycle parking spaces. A similar setback on the rear of the property is utilized to accommodate additional space for the site's parking area. Despite design efforts to maximize the amount of parking, the site was only capable of accommodating 11 of the required 17 stalls without placing parking underground, which would significantly impact construction costs. Given the highly walkable neighborhood and preference of the area residents towards non-automobile-based trips, the site would continue to operate in a functional manner. Parking on the site would consist of 1 visitor, or more specifically, a car share stall, which under the zoning bylaw may be used as a visitor stall, 2 accessible stalls, 1 type A and 1 type B, and 8 regular stalls, for a total of 11 stalls. Of note, the applicant seeks relief from the committee for reduction of 4 stalls, being 1 car share space and 3 visitor spaces. The applicant intends to provide cash in lieu of parking for 2 regular stalls, which is referenced here for full transparency. In respect to bike parking, the applicant wishes to allow for minor changes in how bike parking is programmed by providing a greater share of stacked versus horizontal spaces while maintaining the overall number of bike spaces. In this regard, it is noted that the short-term bike parking has been provided in an enhanced format, with the upper stories providing shelter to all of the short-term parking on the ground floor. Next slide, please. The 30 units are configured in a variety of formats, including studio, 1 and 2 bedroom units with and without dens, for a total of 42 bedrooms. We could go to the next slide, please. The rooftop of the building provides several features consisting of the elevator overrun, stairs, a mechanical room, and a lobby area providing access to these features, as well as outdoor amenity area. The elevator overrun is situated almost 11 meters from the edge of the property line and approximately 8.8 meters from the furthest edge of the building, making it such that the feature would not readily be seen from Princess Street, as illustrated in the image in the top right-hand side. The shrunken floor plate on the rooftop, which results from the various step backs referenced earlier, creates an animated building face, but results in a correspondingly higher percentage of rooftop area for these features, while overall achieving the desirable built form sought by the zoning bylaw. If we could go to the next slide, please. Notice of the application was provided in accordance with the Planning Act. One piece of correspondence was received indicating an error in the notice, which identified a comment deadline of June 16th, 1 month prior to the meeting and after the posting was placed on the property. The notice was updated with the correct deadline for comments using an enlarged font and was reposted on Thursday, July 13th. Subject to approval, the property would be subject to hold removal, site plan control, and a cash in lieu of parking agreement. Next slide, please. In summary, the proposed severance conforms with all applicable policies of the official plan, and a plan of subdivision is not necessary. The proposed variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw, and are desirable for the appropriate development of the subject lands, and are minor in nature. And thank you very much, and would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thanks very much, Ian. So committee members, oh no, so do we have the applicant or their agent here?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a planner with Foten Planning and Design. I am here this evening representing the applicant, although the applicant is also present. I would just add that I've had a chance to review the report from staff and agree with the recommendation, but of course I'm here to assist with any questions or comments from the committee or the public.
Great, thanks for that. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or their agent or staff? Yeah, Ken.
Just three matters. Ian, you used the words intends to provide cash in lieu. I would understand you to mean is required to provide cash in lieu. Is that correct?
Thank you. Through the chair, that's an excellent observation, because before the committee would be those regular parking stalls that sent cash in lieu of parking. They would only be able to resort to a rezoning. So yes, subject to approval, it is their intent, and hearing this conversation, I think the director who has authority to approve that would potentially approve such agreement.
Thanks, and through you, Chair. Sorry, just a matter of clarification. Yeah, during the for this current proposal, they are inclined to and required to provide cash in lieu in order to be zone compliant. Either that or they would have to redesign their site to be zone compliant. So with the current proposal before us, yes, they will be providing cash in lieu.
Okay, Ken.
My second question was just clarity, I think, that as I understand it, the Williamsville planning documents seek side street access. In other words, no access from Princess Street if it's achievable, and hence this application does achieve that by providing access from the side street, Albert Street. I got that correct? In other words, it's preferred to come in from the side street. I just want to make sure I know.
Good question. Yep.
Thanks, and through you, Chair. Yes, the intent is that parking for most of the properties that will front onto Princess Street come from a side street, like Albert, like Frontenac. The policy isn't encouraged, specifically because there will be instances where side street access may not be achievable. So we didn't want to necessarily pigeonhole ourselves with a policy that only required it to come from a side street. So there might be instances where it comes from Princess Street directly, predominantly from mid-block buildings, like this one itself, but this one was able to achieve an easement over a neighboring property in order to gain access from a side street. So it very much fulfills the intent of the policy to pedestrianize Princess Street, to have that active, unbroken Main Street style frontage and have vehicular access come from the rear.
Mr. Chair, if I may just
yes,
add on that same
go.
question, just for the benefit of the committee, that when this application came through pre-application process, the original concept showed access from Princess Street. The feedback that we received through that process was to explore a side street access, and the owner, it was sort of through working through the comments from staff at this, and sort of really driving that messaging from the Williamsville Main Street study that led to the applicant securing the access from Albert Street, which is what's proposed.
Okay, all right. Ken?
My third question for Ian is no further comments came from Mr. Hall. His only comment was concerned with... Go ahead.
I did manage to speak to the individual on the phone, and there were no specific built form issues raised. I was expecting him to elaborate either on process or built form concerns that they might have had. I have my email open and I can confirm to this nothing has been received.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from committee members? All right, I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have members of the public with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 627 Princess Street and 518 Albert Street? Please raise your physical hand or your virtual hand in Zoom. Call a second time. Does anybody want to speak to the application for 627 Princess or 518 Albert? Raise your physical or virtual hand. And my third and final call, would anybody like to speak to the application for 627 Princess Street and 518 Albert, raise your physical hand. I see none, so I'll come back to the committee for a motion. Yes. So a motion moved by Peter and seconded by Ken. Any discussion? None. So all in favor, raise your physical hand. And that is unanimously carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our final application this evening is number I for 926 to 928 Portsmouth Avenue. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance and consent. The file numbers are D10-020-2023 and D13-029-2023. The address is 926-928 Portsmouth Avenue.
Hello, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, staff, members of the public. My name is Nikki Van Vitt. I'm the assigned planner to the file for 926 and 928 Portsmouth Avenue. The purpose of the consent application is to sever the existing semi-detached house along the common party wall to create a lot that is approximately 561 square meters in area with 7 meters of frontage on Portsmouth Avenue, while establishing a reciprocal access easement for pedestrian and vehicular access over both lots. The severed and retained lands are each proposed to be developed with a total of 2 residential units, with a total of 4 aggregate bedrooms on each parcel following the severance. This will be facilitated through internal conversions of the existing 2-dwelling unit structure to create 1 additional dwelling unit within each side of the semi-detached house. The minor variance application is requested to seek relief from the select zone provisions of the bylaw, Kingston zoning bylaw 2022-62, for both sides of the severed and retained lots. The variances will be further discussed in the next few slides. So as was previously referenced, the property is located at 926 and 928 Portsmouth Avenue. The subject lands have an area of approximately 1,450 square meters with 18.2 meters of frontage on Portsmouth Avenue. The property is currently developed with an existing 2-story semi-detached house with a detached accessory structure in the southwest corner of the rear yard. The property is surrounded by a mix of low-density residential development, including single-detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, and triplex dwellings. The property abuts a 1.5-story single-detached dwelling to the north at 936 Portsmouth and south at 924 Portsmouth, a 2-story apartment to the west, and is across the street from a 1.5 and 2-story single-detached dwellings at 3 Gretna Green and 382 Portsmouth Avenue. The property has frontage on a collector road as detailed in Section 4 of the City of Kingston official plan. It is designated residential in the official plan and zoned urban residential 10 under the Kingston zoning bylaw 2022-62. So this is the proposed site plan and access easement for the subject property. And for ease of reference, please see the location of the reciprocal access easement highlighted in yellow on this slide. If I can bring your attention to the bottom image, the site plan, the severed and retained parcels are, as previously identified, proposed to be severed along the common party wall for the internal construction of 2 dwelling units per lot with 4 bedrooms aggregate to each parcel. So as noted on the first slide, through the consent application, a reciprocal easement will be established for the purpose of providing pedestrian and vehicular access along the northern portion of the retained lands to the rear shared parking area located on the severed lands, addressed as 926 Portsmouth, and for pedestrian access at the rear of the barrier, for the barrier-free units to be proposed on the ground floor of each side along the existing pathway to the front of the house. So both the severed and retained lots require minor variance from the minimum lot frontage provision of the UR10 zone. This provision is generally intended to maintain a consistent urban character, to allow for adequate setbacks from surrounding residential uses, and provide safe driveway separation. The requested reduction in lot frontage will permit the severance of the site along the existing common party wall between this existing semi-detached house, retaining the existing functionality of 2 separate front entrances on each side of the semi-detached house. It should be noted that the proposed lots have comparable frontages to those in the surrounding community, as was identified in the report supplied by staff. In addition, both the severed and retained lots require minor variance from the privacy fence requirement for decks and porches below 0.6 meters from finished grade for a semi-detached house. The proposed rear deck is intended to afford access to the barrier-free ground floor units, as identified in the report, to be proposed on the ground floor of each side of the existing semi-detached house, which is contemplated through internal conversions to the existing house and does comply with maximum surface area and rear setback requirements for a deck under the Kingston zoning bylaw. However, the proposal will result in a deck that does require the 1.5 meter privacy fence. However, the applicant is requesting this requirement be removed to provide for greater on-site accessibility, as the installation of a privacy fence would create a barrier on the ramp, which provides access to the ground floor units on each lot. Lastly, a minor variance to the maximum parking area for a parking lot on the severed lot, which is 926 Portsmouth, the southern lot, is being sought to facilitate the proposal. The proposed shared parking area at the rear of the severed lot is exceeding the maximum permitted area due to the inclusion of the proposed Type A accessible parking space, which is above the requirements of the zoning bylaw, associated access aisle, and increased turnaround depth. The maximum parking area requirement is generally intended to preserve the landscaped open space and ensure there is not overdevelopment of the property. Despite the proposed increased parking area, the proposal is supplying an excess of landscaped open space for both the severed and retained lot. And as indicated in the staff report, the owner is required to submit a stormwater management plan prepared by a qualified individual to describe current drainage conditions and post-development conditions as a condition of provisional approval under Condition 6 of Exhibit B, which is page 236 of the report. It should be noted, I'll just go back to the last slide, that post-development flows will not be able to exceed pre-development flows on the property. So as such, the proposal will not result in overdevelopment of the subject lands, as there will be excess landscaped open space, and any recommendation from the required storm management report will be incorporated into the development agreement, which is also Condition 13 of Exhibit B, through provisional approval of the consent application. So this is a proposed internal floor plan and exterior elevation for the subject property. As indicated earlier, the severed and retained parcels are each proposed to be developed with a total of 2 residential dwelling units, with a total of 4 bedrooms aggregate to each parcel, so 2 bedrooms per unit. The redevelopment of the site will result in the creation of 1 barrier-free ground floor unit and 1 upper floor unit in each side of the semi-detached house. I would like to note that part of the internal conversion to introduce the ground floor accessible unit, there will be the removal of 1 window on the upper floor on the northern portion, which is 928 Portsmouth Avenue, and the introduction of 1 ground floor unit where the bedroom will be located, and the removal of 1 window on the ground floor, which will be occurring on both sides of 928 and 926 Portsmouth. So for ease of reference, the removals are indicated in the yellow circle, and the new window is circled in green. So with respect to public consultation, a sign was posted 14 days in advance of the meeting. Notices were sent by mail to the total of 23 property owners within 60 meters of the property, and a courtesy notice was placed in the Kingston WIG standard. To date, 1 formal piece of public correspondence was received since the report was finalized. Concerns were primarily raised around stormwater management, noise from vehicles in the rear parking area and access aisle, snow storage, window placement, and tenancy of units. So as was previously discussed on the last slide, Condition 6 of Exhibit B for provisional approval will require that the owner supplies a stormwater management report to indicate that the post-development flows do not exceed pre-development flows, and any recommendation resulting from the required stormwater management plan will be included within the development agreement, which is registered on title for the lots, which is identified as Condition 13 of Exhibit B. In regards to noise, regulation of motor vehicles is not facilitated through the zoning bylaw, but is regulated under Schedule A of the noise bylaw, which is facilitated through the licensing department, or not licensing, but enforcement department at the city. In addition, as the drive aisle will not permit parking due to the shared easement component, as well as this municipal stormwater easement that is currently located on the northern portion of the property, there will be no vehicles parked along the interior yard of the retained lot. In regards to privacy and overlook, as described on the previous slide, there will be 1 new window on the interior yard on each side of the semi-detached house to facilitate the ground floor unit with the new bedroom, with the removal of 2 windows on the retained lot, 1 on the ground floor and 1 on the second story. With regards to tenancy of the units, as was another concern, the Kingston zoning bylaw does not currently regulate the tenancy of a dwelling unit. However, I will look to see if the applicant and owner would like to add to the specific concern, as well as the snow storage component. So the requested minor variances are desirable for the appropriate development or use of land. The proposed variances meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act and is being recommended for approval subject to the proposed conditions. And the requested consent application has regard to the matters of the Planning Act, and a plan of subdivision is not necessary for the proper and orderly development of the property. As such, the requested consent application is also being recommended for provisional approval. At this time, I am open to receiving any questions, and thank you for the time tonight. Look forward to receiving any additional concerns or comments during the public comment period. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have the applicant or their agent? So if you could please identify yourself by name and address, please.
Hi. Go for it.
Thanks, Matt. There is Matt from Asterisk Engineering, who's also available to speak to the file tonight if necessary. My name is Alicia Ackroyd, and I'm a planner with Photon Planning and Design.
Great, thanks and welcome. Is there anything further you wanted to add to the application?
I don't have anything further at this time, just that we've reviewed staff's report and that we agree with the recommendation.
Thank you. And committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? Peter?
Not really. Well, maybe it's a question, I guess, but I know there's quite a bit of talk about the privacy fence, and then it's also being weighed against the making the accessible ramp, the accessible units accessible. And the privacy fence, from what I understand, would cause a barrier. I don't know if there's, in the future, if there was a problem, would they be able to maybe relocate the decks so that you could have a privacy fence and still have your accessibility? I don't know, but I think weighing the accessibility against the privacy fence, I would vote for the accessibility. I think that we need to accommodate where possible, and I think that's a good trade-off. So,
okay, good question. Do you want to address that?
Sure, yeah, I can address that. With the way that the ramp is configured in order to, like you said, increase accessibility and access from the rear parking area, which provides that accessible space as well, it would, as you said, hinder sort of the ability for if someone was going up the ramp to access the sort of further semi-detached unit. So we would have to expand the deck itself or the ramp that much more and kind of make it another sort of rotation around and then still sort of have that fence which might still create a barrier. So I think that hopefully that addresses the comment that it would end up creating a larger structure and be less accessible in the end.
yeah, you'd pretty well have to have access from both sides of the deck, so you'd have to have two sets of ramps instead of one if you want to have a privacy fence between them. But, like I said, I think it's a fair trade-off.
Good, thanks for that. Any other questions, committee members? None, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have members of the public with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 926-928 Portsmouth Avenue? Please raise your physical hand. Certainly, if you want to come over to this far mic, over to the far left. Right over here. And we'll just get you to state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Lori Pantry. I live at 936 Portsmouth Avenue, right beside the home that we're discussing. My apologies, the person that was talking at the first, I didn't understand a word you said because you were talking so fast and with the echo in here. It's the old age hearing, okay, sorry. Anyways, I do have a lot of concerns and they think they've addressed them, but living right next door to this building, and having been there with my family for 18 years, we live in a one-level house. And our bedroom window is right next to the lane where all these cars are going to be driving by to go into the back parking lot. So yes, the noise has an issue. I sit out in my beautiful deck to have family dinners and stuff with my family. And now we get to look at parked cars. We bought this home because it was like a 236-foot lot. And we've totally enjoyed it and love living there. And this is getting pretty emotional because I don't want to be there if they're going to do that. We've had issues with neighbors, but we've always tried to be good neighbors. The other side, we have an Onguanada home. We've gone to the people that work there and we've said, if there's a fire, an emergency, you knock on our door, we're there for you. We try to help, but I don't begrudge anybody trying to better themselves or make some extra money off property they bought. I have nothing wrong with the 4 apartments, but I just totally cannot deal with having a parking lot. from our experiences, even with the owner that's there now, the upkeep hasn't been the best. The laneway, what are they gonna do? It's such a narrow spot that my bedroom window might be like maybe 3 feet from where their laneway is going to be. And where's all the snow gonna go when they plow out the laneway? Like, I don't want any excess water on my property. As it stands now, in the spring or when it rains, the water comes right across the street, right down that lane through the easement. It's almost gone in their front door of the house there, because we've known people that live there. It's traveled down the lane. Their backyard looks like a lake. It does come over onto my side a bit, which, you know, what will be, will be. But my concerns too is when you build this parking lot, are you going to build it out of cement? Then where's all this excess water going to go? Is it going to drain, or is my backyard going to look like a lake next year because you put the parking lot there? And again, the exhaust, like, are you going to rent to people that only work 8 to 5 and I don't have to listen to like motorcyclists drive by my bedroom window, or somebody that had their exhaust broken? Like, I know maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here, but these are all things going through my mind. And when you've lived there for 18 years, you just want peace and quiet.
All right, thanks very much for that. Anything else?
Are they putting the windows next door in any other places? Because as it is, it's pretty tight having people not look into my bedroom window.
Okay.
And where, okay, you said they're going to enter at the back of the house or the front of the house? Why is there no parking at the front? And I've even lost my train of thought.
Okay, so why no parking?
There has been places, we all know that if we have a car, my husband has a car, we go to rent an apartment, I'm sorry, we only have one parking space or there's no parking spaces. So if it's gone from a 2 to a 4, let them have 2 parking spots out front and don't make the backyard into a parking lot.
Okay, so why no parking in the front? And there was something just before that about you needed clarification on where their entrances were? Is that right?
Are they going to be going in the front, the back, the side? Are there stairs going? Like, I couldn't quite understand that floor plan. I didn't see that one. I
Okay.
just got the letter with the square block
Yes.
where the lot was.
Okay, good. Anything else?
No, I guess that's
Okay,
it.
thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public with us willing or wanting to speak to the application for 926, 928 Portsmouth Avenue? Please raise your hand. And I'll make my third and final call. Do we have anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 926, 928 Portsmouth Avenue? Please let yourself be known. And I see none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the staff or their agent to address the issues.
I can address some unless Steph has.
Yes,
Yeah.
go right ahead.
I think I wrote them down in order, but if I missed any, just let me know. So regarding the parking, I guess I'll tackle first. The rear lane concerns with flooding and water, stormwater management on the rear lane, as well as sort of why the parking in the rear as opposed to the front. So sorry, I'm realizing I'm a little bit far from the mic. The parking that's on site right now, the sort of gravel on Portsmouth Avenue, that's actually located in the municipal right-of-way. So the parking that exists currently is not legal. So as a result, it has to be moved. The parking in the rear, that part itself is not the variance that's being sought. So there is permission to go in the rear. The lot sort of size is the variance that's being sought, and that's in order to accommodate safe turnaround and sort of waiting area in the event that somebody was trying to enter on the laneway while someone else was trying to exit. And to provide the accessible space in the rear because it is just that much larger, and we'd like to have sufficient space for if somebody was using an accessible vehicle and had a mobility device. The parking lot, as a result of having to put the parking in the rear, there is going to be a stormwater management brief and plan prepared as part of the conditions that staff have outlined, and those would have to, or they would not be able to exceed existing flows. So the water sort of situation sitting on the laneway, that laneway is going to be improved through the the laneway will have to be improved with the addition of the parking in the rear, and then any stormwater that is currently an issue will have to be submitted to city staff to be reviewed to say, okay, the actual flow of water will be addressed and it'll be lesser than what's existing currently today. So I think, and related to snow, because obviously that's a part of water as well, the snow is planned to be, the snow storage would be on the west side of that parking area. So that is directly behind where, so if the units are here, the parking area is here, and the snow storage would be right here. So all sort of in a linear fashion. So it wouldn't be sort of in between the area that would be between the dwellings and your property, for example. It would all sort of be flush. Regarding entrances, so currently there's the two entrances at the front on Portsmouth. And what city staff had shown was that there's going to be a reciprocal easement for access for, if you were walking on Portsmouth, you cross the street to the property, you could then enter your upper unit that's proposed through the front. So that is where that's proposed to be right now, where those doors are currently existing. And there'd be a staircase that goes right up to that, the top units. So the stairs will be themselves inside, and there's no physical changes to the doors as currently existing on the front of the houses. So what you see on the Portsmouth Avenue streetscape, it will remain. Aside from the changing of the parking area, that won't exist there anymore. So it'll be sort of just as usual. Somebody will walk in, you won't know that they're going up a set of stairs necessarily, but that's how that will function. At the rear, those are going to be the entrances to the barrier-free units on the ground floor. So that would be a separate entrance. There's going to be one entrance for each unit. So the two upstairs, you go up from the front of Portsmouth, and then if you were in one of the ground floor barrier-free units, you would access through the laneway around up the accessible ramp and into your unit. In terms of noise and property upkeep, I think staff addressed that in terms of the noise bylaw and property standards bylaw. So if there are ongoing concerns, those could always be addressed through bylaw. And I think the last comment was related to the windows, and staff had provided the sort of image up there where we would have a net decrease effectively in windows facing the north side of the property. So on the 928 side, there'd be a removal of one upstairs, and then there'd be a boarding up of one, covered in vinyl to match the rest of the house, and then an addition of a new window to make sure that that bedroom would be habitable.
I'm sorry, so we're not here to debate or make requests. We've had the public portion of the meeting and I've closed that. And if you could address the comments through me, actually, that would sort of avoid
Absolutely.
that.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, but I think there was one other issue I don't know that you mentioned. It was why was there no parking out front? Forgive me if you did address that.
Yeah. No, so through you, Mr. Chair, the parking currently, as I had mentioned, is in the sort of the municipal right-of-way. In order to provide parking, sufficient parking for both the sort of principal dwelling unit and the additional dwelling unit, there wouldn't functionally be enough space to put those in tandem on each of the severed lots. Of course, there is the laneway as existing right now, so one of the alternatives, if it was able to occur, would be that the parking would actually be in that laneway as existing in the sort of interior side, so visible from the streetscape. And so as a result, we're trying to fit all four in the rear, and that's why there's also the requirement for the access easement so that parking can occur on 926 Portsmouth Avenue, which is the furthest south lot, where the entrance itself would be on the furthest north lot.
Okay, and Nikki, I think you had a comment to make?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if we could pull up slide number 8, if that's okay, just to showcase the location of the bedrooms for further clarity, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks for that. No, we've closed the public portion of the meeting, so otherwise this will never end.
So as you can see from the slide, and I apologize for rushing through the presentation, the yellow highlights there are where windows will be removed and blocked up, and the green circle is where the new window will be facilitated to accommodate the second bedroom for the ground floor accessible unit. So that's the window placement for the 928 Portsmouth lot, so that's the retained lot, and the same will be occurring on the severed lot. However, the second floor window is not currently existing on that side, is my understanding, so the same ground floor change will occur. And just in addition to what has already been commented on by Alicia, with regards to the stormwater component, again, I just want to reiterate that is a condition of provisional approval through the consent, so we will not be looking to approve anything that exceeds the pre-development flows. So that will also be registered through the development agreement, which is a separate condition of the consent, which is registered on title. So through this process, we will be reviewing that component specifically. And in addition, with the stormwater easement that's currently in place with the municipal register, we are looking to do a new easement with the city for that component, which does restrict what type of vehicles can travel across that easement. So if there are concerns with certain types of vehicles, that is a restriction that is in place with regards to the storm infrastructure that's below grade on that laneway, as well as no vehicles will be able to be parked along that laneway, one for the stormwater easement restrictions, as well as the overall access through that shared reciprocal easement. So just want to clarify that. That's condition number 11 as well. So.
Okay. Thanks very much for that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so committee members, any questions at this point? No final questions? Okay, so I'll turn it back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Jordan and seconded by Somnath. Any discussion? Yep, okay, so all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that's unanimously carried. Thanks. Okay, that was I. Moving on, so we're finished with the business. Number 9, we don't have any motions. Oh, hang on. No motions. No notices of motions. There was one piece of other business on the addendum. No, that was, okay, so I'm off on that. No correspondence. And the date of the next meeting is August 21st for 5:30, so we just need a motion to adjourn. So it's moved by Peter and seconded by Ken. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your physical hands. And that is unanimously carried. Meeting adjourned at 7:26 p.m. Thanks, everybody.